Where have I seen that poster before? Right, okay. One shit movie influenced by another shit movie. Kind of figures. Black Site Delta is a movie I presume none of you have ever heard of, and that's for good reason. Because it's shit. Really, really shit. And to be honest, I had never really heard of it either until I randomly stumbled across it a couple of weeks ago on Netflix. I looked at it and I thought to myself, you know what, I'll give it a watch. And then by the time it had finished, I realised I'd made a huge mistake. And I'd wasted about an hour and a half of my life that could have been easily spent watching a much better movie. Now, I think the biggest problem I personally have with this movie is the fact that when I saw the thumbnail on Netflix and when I looked at some of the images of it, it looked like it was going to be a movie that was so bad it's good, along a similar line to Sharknado. But unfortunately the movie doesn't even do that. The movie's just bad. It's not bad in a good way, and it's not annoyingly terrible. It's just straight up bad, and even worse, boring. Because from the moment the movie starts, you know you're in for something special. Because the whole movie has a very distinct made-for-TV look to it, whereby it doesn't quite look high production value, but yet it doesn't look like utter shit either. Again, along the similar lines of Sharknado. It just looks like it would be perfectly made for TV, kind of like a Sci-Fi Channel original movie, like, I don't know, Mega Croc versus Sharktopus, or, you know, some of those really odd monster movies that they decide to make. And it looked like that going into it, but when you actually watch the movie, it's just annoyingly tedious and really just uneventful. The direction and cinematography is passable. It's not amazing, it just does its job. It just points the camera in the direction that action is happening, and that's about it. It's as basic as filmmaking can get, and it's really boring to look at. Honest to God, like, the lighting is nice, but yet again, it's the kind of quality I would rather expect to see on a Sci-Fi Channel production, or even like a YouTube, you know, short film, like something I would make, or something on this platform would make. Which, to be honest, now thinking about it, I think this movie would have been a lot better if it was a YouTube short film rather than a full-fledged movie. Because things could happen a lot quicker and get things wrapped up a lot more sudden than they do in the movie, because in this movie certain things do drag a little, whereas in this, if it was a short film, it could just be wrapped up into a nice little 20 to 30 minute ball. Also, whilst we're on the subject of the direction and cinematography, the action in this movie is filmed in the worst possible way. Now, I know a main problem of action movies nowadays is shaky cam. Luckily, this movie doesn't have that much shaky cam. But that being said, when the action does happen in the movie, again, like I said earlier, they just point the camera in that direction and expect it to look nice. For example, there is a moment in the movie where a good guy, is sniping bad guys from a rooftop. And even though they do a few zoom-ins, you can tell they're using just the same cameras and the same angles throughout the entire scene. One close-up shot of the sniper and one wide shot of the soldiers being shot. Also, the characters in this movie, more specifically the main group that you're supposed to root for, are just so bland. And they're not actually real characters, they're just a bunch of characteristic traits that happen to be in a group with each other. For example, you have the psychopath who likes using knives, you have the muscular redneck who's kind of like the tank of the group, you have the mentally scarred war veteran who doesn't want to kill people anymore but will have to save his friends. You have the black computer geek who happens to know everything about the place they're in and happens to know exactly how to stop the main MacGuffin of the movie. You have the main protagonist, who I'm just going to call Action Man, because that's really what he is. He happens to have some sort of a connection with one of the bad guys of the movie, and he's just a tough guy who's like your average Joe kind of person. And finally, there is what I like to describe as discount Michelle Rodriguez. Honest to God, if you put them two in the exact same room together, you would not tell the difference. She's a woman, she happens to be a badass, but she also doesn't need a man to, show her the way or save her. Yet again, she does contradict that later in the movie, and that's something that the movie does quite a lot of. They set up these character traits that you are just supposed to, go with. And that's all well and good, but they do things with the characters that just come completely out of left field and don't make any sense for those characters. For example, and yes, what I'm about to say are spoilers, but to be honest, none of you really heard of this movie until I started talking about it in this video, so I don't really think you give a shit, so I'm going to do it anyway. The first one that I'm going to mention is the one that kind of completely ruins the discount Michelle Rodriguez's character. There is a moment where her and Action Man are wandering through the halls looking for bad guys and trying to cover the black guy who's in a room somewhere trying to stop this missile drone thing from reaching a civilized area. And they could use this scene for multiple reasons. They could add character development. They could make you learn a bit more about the characters, which you do kind of, but it isn't really that interesting. And to be honest, they could have done so much with that character. Make them, share a joke or attend a moment. But no, they start kissing. With no romantic connection whatsoever, they just kiss in the middle of the hallway. Quite violently, actually. And it's so out of left field that even discount Michelle Rodriguez just says fuck it mid-sentence and starts snogging the shit out of Action Man. It literally, as it happened, I verbally said at the top of my voice, what the actual fuck? There was no romance set up with these characters, and there didn't need to be. This is something that I really don't like when movies do. When they just set up a romance that you have to go along with for the sake of the movie. And this movie probably has the worst one because it literally comes out of nowhere halfway through the movie and smacks you round the face with it. Another moment that really didn't make any sense and I actually thought was quite funny when it happened involves the main bad guy of the movie. And the reason I say that is because there are actually two bad guys in this movie. You have the foreign guy who has personal reasons that happen to connect to one of the main characters, and he's there for a personal reason, but he's letting all the other people do the work. And in terms of other people, you have the stereotypical British bad guy who once was good but then turned to terrorism and bad guy stuff, and he's doing the dirty work for this foreign guy. And there's one bit where the foreign guy just completely loses his shit because it's taking too long, tells all of his soldiers to get in there, and he's like really mad, and he's just like, go, get in there, everyone do that, and he's holding a gun and he's just snorted a load of coke off his hand. And then he points the gun at his girlfriend, or wife, or whatever the fuck she is. It really didn't make any sense. He literally just snorts the coke, shouts at his soldiers, and then points the gun at her and tells her to get back in the fucking car or otherwise I will shoot your brains out. It doesn't make any sense, and as soon as it happened, I honestly could not help but laugh. Because a couple of scenes ago, they were snogging the shit out of each other and so madly, deeply in love with each other. And now, he's just pointing a gun at her face for no reason whatsoever. And the weird thing is, she doesn't really care. She's just like, okay, I'll get back in the car. Love you. And he just goes, I love you too. And we're just supposed to forget about it. That he pointed a gun at his wife, girlfriend, whatever the hell. Oh my god. It doesn't make any sense. And the last part I want to mention, which is probably the most what the fuck moment in the entire movie, is when the redneck character betrays the main protagonists. I want to say halfway through the movie, maybe a little bit later. He's just in a room waiting for something to happen with the psychopath guy, and he just straight up talks to the bad guys and betrays his friends. Well, they're not really his friends, but you know what I mean. That moment really didn't make any sense, and I feel as if the only reason it's in the movie is just so it can, you know, make things a bit more interesting. Because there is a solid 5 to 10 minutes worth of this movie where nothing happens. Honest to God. They get to the places they need to get to. Everything should be starting to wrap up, but apparently they can't do something because the drone isn't there yet. And this causes about 10 to 20 minutes worth of the movie, which, seeing that this is an hour-and-a-half long movie, makes it feel like almost half the length, is just spent with the characters doing fuck all but standing there. You could tell the longer the movie went on, the longer the movie actually didn't know what the fuck it was doing. So they just start to make shit up as they go on, to the point where it just suspends disbelief. Because throughout the majority of the movie, even though you know none of it is realistic whatsoever, you presume they are real people. But then there's one thing that happens that is probably the most bullshit thing I've seen in a movie this year. Where the hardened war veteran, who is the guy sniping people from a rooftop, gets shot by the British bad guy. This is also the moment when he's realised the rednecks betrayed them. Now, I would have been absolutely fine if the veteran died on the roof and they found another way to handle the redneck subplot. But instead, they decide to keep the veteran alive, when at this point he's pretty much bleeding out near death. And also, he's on a rooftop that's here, and the rednecks in a building here that are really, really far away from each other. Like, I want to say about half a mile between each other, maybe even a mile apart. And somehow, even though he's been shot and he's in agony and he's almost dead, the veteran walks from, well, he crawls from that building to where the redneck is and kills the redneck. That was the moment in the movie where I honestly just went, you know what, fuck this film, it's utter shit. And it is for those reasons why I'm going to give Black Site Delta a 3 out of 10. If you want to watch it, go ahead, but honestly, I would recommend a much better movie if I were you. So guys, that's my review of Black Site Delta. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about my worst movie experiences ever. I'm still working on it, but I hopefully should have it out very soon, as well as some more new reviews. I apologise for the lack of actual reviews, by the way, throughout the month of September. Mainly because there were no new releases that really caught my eye and I really wanted to go and see. But there are some movies from earlier in the year I have caught up with, as well as some new releases I hope to review very, very soon. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye!